The Middle East in 2025-2026 is a region perched on a geopolitical knife edge, where every missile flight, diplomatic exchange, and internal protest carries implications far beyond local borders. In the heart of this volatile landscape stands a confrontation with consequences for the entire world: Israel versus Iran. The question that hangs over capitals from Jerusalem to Washington, Tehran to Riyadh, is stark and chilling. Will full-scale war finally break out between two of the region's most powerful and determined states? To answer that, we must trace the arc of escalating tensions, examine how recent conflicts have reshaped capabilities and perceptions on both sides, and listen to the voices of leaders, strategists, and people on the front lines of fear and hope. The story begins not in 2026, but years earlier, rooted in history, ideology, and a series of confrontations that have pushed both countries toward confrontation. Israel and Iran have long seen each other through lenses of existential threat and regional dominance. Iran's leadership views Israel not simply as a political adversary, but as an ideological enemy tied to Western power structures in the Middle East. Israel, for its part, perceives Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional influence through the prism of survival. These mutual perceptions have driven a shadow war of proxies, cyber operations, and targeted strikes long before the possibility of open, direct conflict became real. By mid-2025, that shadow war erupted into one of the most intense direct confrontations in recent Middle Eastern history. In June of that year, Israeli forces launched one of the most significant offensive operations against Iranian territory since the 1980s, targeting over 100 strategic military and nuclear sites deep inside Iran. This campaign, involving more than 200 aircraft and hundreds of munitions, struck nuclear facilities and command centers, killing high-ranking commanders and scientists identified with Iran's nuclear program. Iran's response was swift and dramatic, firing more than 150 ballistic missiles and over 100 drones toward Israeli territory, a scale of retaliation that marked a clear departure from previous proxy or indirect engagements. The barrage targeted major cities including Tel Aviv and Haifa, testing Israel's multi-layered air defenses and causing casualties and infrastructure damage. The battlefield shifted from covert operations to overt missile exchanges, pushing discussions of a possible full-scale war from abstract speculation into hard reality. Political leaders in the United States, Israel's closest ally, openly warned of the risk of a major conflict. U.S. officials acknowledged that any military escalation could rapidly expand beyond the region, underscoring the fine line between tactical retaliation and strategic catastrophe. Yet for all the violence of June 2025, a full-scale ground war has not materialized. Instead, what the world saw was a brutal and complex episode of long-range strikes, defense system duels, and remarkable resilience on both sides. Israel, leveraging advanced air defenses like the Iron Dome and Arrow systems, intercepted the majority of incoming missiles and drones, preserving civilian life and critical infrastructure even as the warning sirens echoed across towns and cities. Iran's massive missile salvo was not a random act. It was calibrated to test defenses and signal Tehran's willingness to escalate if cornered. Instead of a clear victory for either side, the wartime standoff shifted into a tense ceasefire, maintained but fragile. Iran's nuclear program, though significantly damaged in its physical infrastructure, was not destroyed. Tehran pledged to continue enrichment, even as it accused the international community of double standards and failure to uphold non-proliferation norms. In the aftermath, strategic calculations in capitals across the globe shifted. Regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and Oman openly expressed deep concern that military intervention against Iran could trigger an even wider conflagration. In January 2026, these governments urged restraint from the US and Israel, warning that open military action could destabilize the entire Middle East and provoke unpredictable worldwide consequences. Diplomacy has not disappeared entirely, even as Iran's leadership faces internal protests over economic conditions and political repression, which itself adds another layer of instability. There are threads of ongoing talks, often mediated by third countries, aimed at easing tensions and preventing another outbreak of hostilities. But fear remains potent. Whether it's Iranian warnings of severe retaliation on any US or Israeli attack, or Israeli rhetoric stressing its right to preemptively defend itself against existential threats, both sides broadcast a message of resolve that keeps the region nervous. Analysts warn that while a direct, full-scale war is not inevitable, the risk is far from negligible, especially if diplomatic channels falter, miscalculations occur, or internal pressures push leaders toward aggressive posturing. The strategic calculus is complicated by global geopolitics. The United States has repositioned military assets in the region, balancing support for Israel with caution about becoming directly embroiled in another war. Meanwhile, Iran's ties with other powers and its regional networks of allied militias further complicate any simple pathway to peace. So, as the world watches, the question stands: will full-scale war break out? The answer is not a simple yes or no. It is a mosaic of decisions yet to be made, pressures yet to be felt, and thresholds yet to be crossed. Some analysts argue that the direct exchange of missiles, drones, and airstrikes already constitutes a form of war, even if not in the traditional sense. Others insist that neither side wants total war, precisely because the stakes are so high and the consequences so uncontrollable. What is clear is that the situation between Israel and Iran remains one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints of our time. Every show of strength, every failed negotiation, every new missile test, and every diplomatic rebuke adds to the tension in a story that has no easy resolution. While Israel and Iran stand as the two central actors in this confrontation, the battlefield between them is not confined to their borders. In fact, one of the most dangerous aspects of this rivalry is that it rarely unfolds directly. Instead, it spreads outward, across borders, through militias, and into fragile states already burdened by conflict. This is where the war becomes larger, messier, and far more unpredictable. At the center of Iran's regional strategy lies the concept of forward defense. Rather than waiting for an enemy to strike Iranian territory, Tehran has spent decades building influence and military presence far from its own borders. This strategy has produced a network of allied groups across the Middle East, organizations trained, armed, and funded to serve as both deterrents and instruments of pressure. To Iran, these groups are a shield. To Israel, they are a noose slowly tightening. The most powerful and dangerous of these allies is Hezbollah in Lebanon. Born in the chaos of Lebanon's civil war and shaped by Iranian ideology and funding, Hezbollah has evolved into a hybrid force, part militia, part political party, and part standing army. It possesses an estimated arsenal of more than 100,000 rockets and missiles, many of them capable of reaching deep into Israeli territory. For Israeli military planners, Hezbollah represents the single greatest immediate threat to the country's civilian population. Every time tensions rise between Israel and Iran, the northern border with Lebanon becomes a focal point of anxiety. A single miscalculation, an errant rocket, a targeted assassination, or an airstrike gone wrong could ignite a conflict far larger than anything seen since the 2006 Lebanon War. Israeli leaders have repeatedly warned that any future war with Hezbollah would be faster, broader, and far more destructive than before. Iranian officials, meanwhile, hint that Hezbollah's involvement would be inevitable in any full-scale war with Israel. To the south, Gaza represents another volatile front. Though Hamas and Islamic Jihad are Sunni groups and ideologically distinct from Iran's Shiite leadership, they share a common enemy in Israel. Iran's support, financial, technical, and military, has helped transform Gaza into a persistent source of pressure on Israel's southern border. Rocket barrages from Gaza may not rival Hezbollah's arsenal, but they serve a strategic purpose, forcing Israel to divide its attention, resources, and defenses. Beyond Israel's immediate borders, Syria has become one of the most critical arenas in the Israeli-Iran rivalry. The Syrian civil war created opportunities for Iran to embed itself deeply within the country, establishing military bases, weapons depots, and logistical routes linking Tehran to Beirut. Israel has responded with hundreds of airstrikes over the years, targeting Iranian positions and preventing advanced weapons from reaching Hezbollah. These strikes, often conducted with surgical precision, have become almost routine. But routine does not mean safe. Each Israeli strike in Syria carries the risk of escalation. Iranian personnel have been killed. Syrian air defenses have fired back. Russian forces, present in the country, add another layer of complexity. What has so far remained a controlled campaign could rapidly spiral into something much larger if red lines are crossed or political calculations change. Iraq, too, has emerged as a quiet but dangerous front. Iranian-aligned militias operate across the country, some of them possessing drones and missiles capable of striking Israeli or Western targets. While Iraq's government attempts to maintain neutrality, it struggles to control these armed groups, making the country a potential launchpad for further escalation. Yemen, thousands of kilometers away, might seem an unlikely player in the Israeli-Iran confrontation, yet the Houthis, another Iranian-backed group, have demonstrated their ability to strike shipping lanes and long-range targets. Their involvement underscores a key reality. Any full-scale war between Israel and Iran would not be limited to two nations. It would ripple across the entire region, threatening global trade routes, energy supplies, and economic stability. As these proxy fronts simmer, pressure builds not only on the battlefield but also within Iran itself. Years of economic sanctions have taken a heavy toll on the Iranian population. Inflation, unemployment, and shortages have fueled waves of protests, particularly among younger generations. These internal challenges complicate Tehran's decision-making. On one hand, external confrontation can be used to rally nationalist sentiment and distract from domestic unrest. On the other, a major war could further devastate the economy and threaten regime stability. Israel faces its own internal pressures. A society accustomed to conflict nonetheless lives under constant strain. Missile sirens, military mobilizations, and political divisions weigh heavily on the population. Israeli leaders must balance the need for security with the risk of dragging the nation into a prolonged and costly war. The memory of past conflicts, some decisive, others inconclusive, shapes public debate and political calculations. Above all this looms the question of nuclear escalation. While Israel has never officially acknowledged its nuclear arsenal, it is widely believed to possess significant capabilities. Iran's nuclear program, though not yet weaponized according to most assessments, continues to advance. This creates a dynamic of mutual deterrence mixed with deep mistrust. Each side fears that waiting too long could be fatal, yet acting too soon could unleash irreversible consequences. The international community watches nervously. The United States remains Israel's most important ally, providing military aid, intelligence support, and diplomatic backing. Yet Washington is also acutely aware of the risks of direct involvement. A regional war could draw U.S. forces into another prolonged conflict, strain alliances, and destabilize global markets. American leaders walk a tightrope, supporting Israel's security while urging restraint behind the scenes. Other global powers play quieter but significant roles. Russia, with interests in Syria and ties to Iran, seeks to avoid chaos that could undermine its regional influence. China, heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy, prioritizes stability and has positioned itself as a potential mediator. European nations, haunted by the prospect of refugee flows and economic shocks, push for de-escalation through diplomacy. Despite these efforts, the logic of escalation remains powerful. Military buildups create expectations. Red lines invite testing. Domestic politics reward displays of strength. And in such an environment, accidents can be as dangerous as deliberate decisions. History offers sobering lessons. Many of the world's most devastating wars did not begin because leaders sought total destruction. They began because leaders believed conflict could be controlled, limited, or quickly resolved. The danger in the Israeli-Iran confrontation lies not only in intent, but in miscalculation. As missiles replace messages and threats overshadow talks, the margin for error narrows. The region edges closer to a moment where restraint may no longer be enough, where one strike too many forces a response that cannot be undone.